Prepared. We've taken a drink. We've fired a Nerf gun at the camera. We apparently reached our stream donations goal for the week. Though I'm certainly not going to complain if anybody wants to make me suffer with the Streamlabs donation thing again. But speaking of suffering, I think we probably need to have a conversation about why it pleases God to have his children suffer. Now, you and I are probably going to sit here and contemplate if the only reason we're here is to suffer. However, this person, who's named their channel The Daughter of Virtue, believes that it pleases God to have his children suffer, and would like to explain to us why that is. So, let's go ahead and find out.
Hello, sisters in Christ. I pray you are all doing well and you are growing in the Lord each and every day. I want to talk to you all today about suffering and how we are called to suffer with the Lord. The Bible tells us that this is something that we should expect as followers of Christ. That we're
okay, but why though?
We're going to follow in the same path that Jesus took while he was here. And why suffering is something that pleases God.
All right. Let's go ahead and begin with calling God a sadomasochist. Or just a sadist in general in this case. Well, no. If Jesus is in fact the Son of God and also God, and it pleased him to watch himself suffer, then yeah, no, this is sadomasochism. Okay, so I'm going to make a prediction from somebody who has not watched this video yet, but was suggested this video, that we're going to get the apologia that because God led a life of suffering, being pinned up on the cross and bled out and penetrated by a bunch of Roman men, then he's the conversation is going to be, we need to lead a Christ-like life and therefore suffer the same way he did. Now, that's a prediction. It might not come true, but let's go ahead and see where we go.
It's a very simple question to ask ourselves, but you know, when you're really going through it and you're going through those times of trials and testing, it's easy to say that, you know, you want to rejoice in that suffering.
It's easy to say you want to rejoice in that? I don't think that's easy to say.
As the Bible tells us to. But how do we truly, really rejoice in that suffering from our heart? How do we sincerely mean that we rejoice in that suffering, especially when it's just so painful while you're going through it?
So, all right, let's go ahead and talk about the mentality that comes as a result of this kind of thinking. Before we even get into theology, before we get into the problems, just as far as a belief system is concerned, the base mentality that suffering is good, my suffering is good, I should be able to rejoice in my suffering, not rejoice through it, not rejoice that, you know, you're learning something or there's some benefit to be had for you as an individual, even though you are going through hell. Hell, my kitchen, I did not want to suffer through having to build that damn thing, but I couldn't afford to do anything other than that. And by building it, I gained a lot of experience. Now, the suffering itself wasn't something that I wanted, but the experience I gained was nice. This is a different type of mentality. This is the actual suffering itself being virtuous. Why is this a problem? Well, can you think of any number of abusive situations that someone could not justify to themselves based on this kind of mentality? That someone could not sit there and go, no. It's not bad that I'm suffering in this abusive relationship. The suffering makes me stronger. I'm happy suffering through this abusive relationship. And the fact that my partner in this relationship is making me suffer, that is good. It's the same exact kind of mentality. It tracks the exact same way. And there are jokes being made in the chat that I actually do agree with, unironically, that in this case God is just a bad dom, and fuck safe words, what's even consent in this scenario?
And this is what the Lord showed me recently, because I just had my 3 years birthday, I guess you could say, of being born again.
You certainly have the mentality of a 3-year-old with this kind of reasoning, but let's continue.
And how immediately once he moved in, the battle started. And here I am 3 years later, and there is still much, much suffering that takes place. And it almost seems like, ladies, as you grow in your walk, that suffering, it's like it almost just slowly increases and increases.
That doesn't make it better. The idea that getting into a relationship with anyone, much less a deity, should necessitate that you now are engaged in suffering, and that suffering is going to increase the longer you're in this relationship, that's not a sign that things are going well for you, daughter of virtue. That's a sign that things are going poorly. That's a sign that you need therapy. If being in a relationship is in fact suffering to you, and it gets worse and worse the longer you're in it, that's when you seek counseling, not consoling yourself within the relationship itself. Like, again, this isn't just isolated issues. This is the type of thinking that can lead to somebody being completely and totally okay with being in an abusive relationship, especially one where the abuse escalates.
Inwardly. It's an inward. There's a verse in the Bible that talks about how we groan within ourselves. There is that groaning that we waiting for that adoption of the Lord, the redemption of our bodies. We are continually groaning within ourselves. And I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but I definitely know exactly what that verse means. Because there's a joy, there's a peace that comes with the Lord, a peace that comes with that, just even the chastening that the Lord does on us. But there's just that inward where you just don't even have the words to say.
If you cannot articulate it to me, then maybe you shouldn't be telling me that I should be suffering for the sake of your terrible dom of a deity. I don't want to sit here and just make fun of this person. This is actual abuse victim mentality. This is the mentality that causes people to go, no, it's okay that my partner hit me. I deserved it. No, it's okay that my partner was drinking that day. That makes it okay that he said those terrible things to me. That's the type of mentality that this breeds. Because if you're going to hold the person who you should hold to the highest standard, right? Let's go ahead and pretend we're Christian for a second. God should be the person that we hold at the highest standard. If the person you hold at the highest standard is allowed to abuse you, is allowed to make you suffer, and you're making apologetics as to why your suffering is good, it wouldn't necessarily follow that it is entirely okay for somebody under the ladder who doesn't have to meet such high standards can do the same to you, could do the same to you. This is not healthy thinking by any stretch.
You just are, you're perplexed, as the Bible says. And so how do we really rejoice? How do we understand that God was pleased to crush his son? It was pleasing to him to crush him.
All right. Give me an H in the chat if you're a parent, please. If you're a parent, you have children. Would it ever please you to crush, mind you, Jesus died, so crush to death, your child? Just, I am almost 100% certain that none of you would think that that's an okay thing to do. Here, however, we have a celebration of that. It was okay. Not only was it okay for God to crush his son, but he took pleasure in it, and that's good too. That's not healthy. That's not good.
Encourage us to keep going in our walk. And there are times when I'm in prayer, ladies, that I have even found myself saying the same things that Jesus said when he was in the garden before he was arrested and brutally tortured for hours and then crucified on the cross.
What have you gone through that has necessitated that kind of thinking? Like, I'm not saying that you haven't gone through something bad. I have no idea who you are. I don't know what your life story is. But what could you have possibly gone through where the same things that went through a man who was about to get himself killed went through your head? I don't get it. Also, there's nothing out there. She just keeps on barking. There's nothing out there. But I guess we will continue on.
I find myself saying sometimes, Lord, please take this cup of suffering from me.
But I thought that you said that suffering was good. Why would you want your God, your abusive dictator deity, to stop making you suffer? Why would you want that burden lifted? You were celebrating it just 2 minutes ago.
Take it from me. Nevertheless, your will be done, Lord, not mine. And it's an inward, constant suffering, ladies, when you're born again.
And why are you advocating for this?
But I wanted to know why. Why are you... I heard in my spirit that it pleased the Father to bruise his son, to crush and to see his son suffer. So
why is that a good thing?
Why does it please him when he sees us suffer? Because I want to be pleased. I genuinely want to be pleased during this time of suffering. Because I want the Lord's heart. I'm continually...
No. Don't do this shit. Don't do this thing where you want... You in almost a Stockholm-style setting, you want an abuser's affection so much that you are willing to make yourself hurt, make yourself suffer, so long as it gains their favor. This is terrible victim mentality. This is awful. When you are hurting and you are sitting there going, not only is the hurting bad, but you want the hurting to please you. Not in a kinky way, but in a legitimate, another being is making you go through hell, and you're trying to find some way to be okay with that. And on top of that, you are trying to advocate for this type of thinking. You are trying to suggest to other people that they necessarily take this same mentality that you're taking, this abused mentality, this hurt mentality. You want them to go through the same thing you're going through. It's one thing to be hurt, but don't be the hurt person hurting other people.
Really after his heart. And so he showed me, after I asked him for this, he pretty much immediately gave me an answer.
Okay.
And I just had this image in my mind, like oil press. And I didn't really understand totally what that meant. So I looked it up. I looked up just the process of how the oil, or the olives are harvested, which is really interesting that they're harvested in the months of September, October, November. That's when they're picked from the olive
This is going
trees.
to be the same kind of argument.
And I became born
as,
again
like,
in
your
October.
graphite,
And
so you have
not
to
that,
be
I mean,
smashed
people can
into
be born
diamond,
again
right?
any month. But it was like the Lord was speaking directly to me when I heard this, because immediately, once those olives are harvested and picked, they are then taken and they're put in a circular thing where they would have a donkey actually strapped to a millstone, and the millstone would just go in a circular motion and would crush these olives. Now, if you picked these olives and immediately within 24 hours crushed them, that's like the best quality olive oil you can get. That's
all right. People deserve to suffer and people deserve to be crushed so we can get some deified olive oil. Now, I understand that the point she's trying to make is essentially the same thing as, getting a diamond out of graphite, right? You're trying to make that carbon so dense that it comes out as a diamond on the other side and can be used for more things. But can we go ahead and point out there's a difference between graphite and olives? And that is that graphite and olives do not need to consent to be conformed to the will of a sentient being. People, on the other hand, people need to be able to consent. Even if you were to grant the premise, okay, fine, suffering is good and all, whatever sick, twisted way of thinking you want to manage is fine. But after that, you then have to go, even if these things are good, why should these things be forced on people, and why should we accept that? Like, okay, I'm not ace, so to me, sex is good. Sex is great. But even though I think that it's great, I still should have to be able to consent to sex. It's no different here. Why would you argue for a position that strips the autonomy away from every individual human being and forces them to do something that, don't worry, it's good for them? Balmong has it right in the chat. God needs his soul oil for just right for his cooking. I'm reminded of that one demon in Yu Yu Hakusho who used to run with Hiei and Kurama, and would just steal children and would normally like cook them over a fire to get the soul out just right, but then found a thing that just pulls the soul out immediately, and it was so perfect to him, and he loved it, and it was wonderful. And it's like, all the same problems present themselves there, dude. Nobody consented to you eating their fucking soul. Jesus.
That's what's called extra virgin olive oil.
People are extra virgin olive oil, everybody.
It's the best quality. So immediately after they're picked, they're crushed by this millstone, and the olives turn into like a paste. And once they're that pasty substance that's just been crushed,
She's fucking laughing, but this is sick.
they then take the paste and they place them in these like woven baskets and they stack them on top of one another, the
Okay.
crushed olives. And then they place something really heavy, like a stone, on top, and they crush. The weight of all of those baskets literally causes the pressing process. So the olives then go from that paste after being crushed to actual olive oil. And it is so cool when you see the image of all of these
Now, I want you to imagine all of that olive oil coming out of those baskets, but now imagine that it's people, and this is her argument. This is people. She thinks it's good that this is people.
baskets stacked on top of each other with the crushed olives and the oil just seeping. It is just, it's so awesome. Now, why is this awesome? Well,
Because you desperately need some way to make it make sense to you that a sadomasochistic god would make his children suffer necessarily.
that first process of the pressing of the olives creates the oil that they get. They do it 3 times. They press and crush and beat these oils down 3 times to get the best quality oil the first time.
How is this a good thing for people, though?
That first amount of oil that is pressed is the most precious of oil. That was the oil that was considered the first fruits that was taken to the temple and offered to the Lord.
Okay, so while that's all great and all, and I'm sure finding all the different ways in which you can justify human suffering would get you off, it doesn't do it for me, because I tend to find things like consent great, okay? So let's go ahead and stop her video here. We may end up doing a part 2, but we're going to stop her video here so we can analyze what we've seen so far, and let's talk about it. First of all, we have the very, very slow speaking. Now, I don't know if this is just how this person normally talks, but it sounds almost hypnotic. It sounds almost like somebody's trying to lull you in. This does not necessarily mean that this is good or bad, but it is a thing that I noted. Another thing that I've noted here. There's these allegories that are being used that are... No allegory, no analogy is going to be one-to-one, but if your analogy to a human being is crushing them so that you can get their delicious juices out, then maybe consent should be a consideration at some point during here. The justification so far seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it pleases God to have his children suffer because God knows that by having his children suffer, they will come out of that better on the other end. Now, again, we had the conversation earlier about who in the chat is a parent. I'm going to ask the parents in my chat again. If you have a child who is suffering through a hardship, you as the adult know that it's going to make them stronger. It's going to make them better. But at any point during the time that you're watching your child suffer, do you take pleasure in that? Do you sit there and go, it's good that Jimmy's dealing with all this bullying. It's going to build his character. Now, would you consider that a quality of a good parent, or would you consider that a quality of an abusive parent? Because I would consider that to be not exactly indicative of good parenting at all. Like in any way, shape, or form. But apparently, this is good to Daughter of Virtue. Now, later in the stream, we may actually cover the other half of her video, but I need to take a break from this. This is worse than the transformed wife. This is worse than Paul and Morgan. This is somebody who literally is basking in the idea of other human beings, including themselves, suffering through some of the most horrific things. If you can imagine it happening to a person, you can bet your ass that her version of God has imagined it happening to somebody as well. And according to her, he's gleeful in that. That makes him happy. This is disgusting. This is the type of mentality that leads people to stay in abusive relationships because it will make them better. It will make them stronger. Oh, don't worry about all the terrible things my partner has done and said. All this makes me a stronger person, and it makes it to where I'm better suited to help my child, or whatever dumb apologetic you want to bring into the scenario. This is not healthy thinking. This is not the thinking of a healthy individual. This is the thinking of somebody who desperately needs deprogramming, who desperately needs therapy. And I've got to take a mental break from it. I will do I will later in the stream probably do a second part, but not yet. Not yet. There's been a bit much here. But if you have enjoyed the suffering I get, I'm never going to be saying that the same way ever again. Go ahead and hit the like button. Go ahead and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell notification icon so that you can know when videos go live and when streams go live. But past that, streams go live generally about 1 p.m. every few days on my channel, 1 p.m. Eastern, and videos go live at 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern every day as well. Thank you all for watching. I'm going to take a breather from this.